The dirt road had no name. It appeared on no map that mattered, connected nothing that the people who used maps considered worth connecting, and existed in the specific forgotten way that roads exist when they serve only the people who have no choice but to use them. Red laterite dust, potholes that could swallow a wheel whole, cashew trees on both sides dropping their fruit without ceremony onto ground that received everything without complaint. It was the kind of road that certain cars were never meant to travel. And the black Mercedes Maybach that sat in the middle of it at 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon was precisely that kind of car. The engine had stopped 12 minutes ago. Inside, Mama Yetunde Adesanya-Coker sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the road ahead through the windshield with the expression she wore in boardrooms when something had gone wrong and she was deciding how to respond to it. 65 years old, silver hair cut close, cream Ankara wrapper and blazer, the kind that was made for her by a woman in Ikoyi whose waiting list was 8 months long. Diamond studs in her ears, small, precise, chosen for their quality rather than their visibility. Everything about her said, "This woman makes decisions, and the decisions hold." Her driver, Festus, was outside with his phone pressed to his ear. She could see him through the windshield, walking in small circles the way people walk when they are on hold, and the hold is making them anxious. He had been on hold for 11 minutes. She had counted. She got out of the car. The heat arrived immediately. Not the air-conditioned heat of Lagos Island where she had spent the morning, but the full, physical, unapologetic heat of a road in Ogun State at the height of the dry season. It pressed against her like something with weight. The dust settled on her shoes. Italian leather, the color of aged honey, within seconds of her feet touching the ground. She looked at the road in both directions. Nothing in either direction except the cashew trees and the heat and the specific quality of silence that exists far from any city. A silence that is not empty, but full. Full of insects and wind and the distant sound of something she could not identify. She said, "Festus." He looked up from the phone. His expression said everything before his mouth did. She said, "Put the phone down." He put it down. She said, "Is there a mechanic in this area?" He looked at the road as if it might answer. He said, "Madam, this road, I am not sure anyone." She said, "Find out." He reached for his phone again. She said, "Not on the phone. Ask someone." He looked at her. She looked at him. He walked. She stood beside the Maybach in the Ogun State afternoon and thought about what she was doing on this road in the first place. The answer was not complicated. She had been to see a piece of land, 400 hectares, mostly forest, the kind of land that her company acquired before anyone else understood what it would become. Her land manager had said the road was manageable. Her land manager had been wrong. She had been wrong to trust the word manageable without asking what it meant to the person using it. She did not make this kind of error often. When she did, she noted it and moved on. She was noting it now. Festus returned 14 minutes later with a young boy of perhaps 12 who was carrying a bicycle and looking at the Maybach with the specific total attention of someone encountering something they have only seen in other people's stories. Behind the boy, further down the road, a motorcycle appeared, then stopped. The man on it looked at the car. Then he came forward. He was perhaps 42. He wore a work shirt the color of engine oil, dark blue, worn soft with washing, and trousers that had been repaired at the left knee with thread that did not quite match. His boots were the kind that had done real work and showed it honestly. He carried no tools visibly, but the way he moved toward the car told her that tools were familiar to him, the way words are familiar to people who have spent their lives reading. He stopped 3 meters from the car. He looked at it. He walked around to the front without being asked and said something to Festus. Festus opened the bonnet. The man looked at the engine with the focused, unhurried attention of someone reading a text they have read many times before. He said, "The cooling system. The fan belt is gone, and the coolant is empty. The engine shut itself down to avoid damage." He said it in English, clear and direct, without the performance of expertise that people sometimes put on when they want to impress. He said it as information. She said, "Can you fix it here?" He looked at the engine, then at her. He said, "I need parts. The fan belt I can find in the town, 20 minutes from here. The coolant I have on my bike." He paused. "It will take time. Maybe 2 hours." She said, "What is your name?" He said, "Adewale. Adewale Ogundimu." She said, "Go and get the parts, Adewale. I will wait." If you have ever stood on a road that had no name and understood, in the heat and the silence, that something was about to change, stay with me. Because this is not a story about a broken car. It is a story about what happens when the most powerful woman in a room is standing on a dirt road with no room around her, and a man with oil on his hands is the only person who can help. He left on his motorcycle. She sat in the shade of one of the cashew trees, on a cloth that Festus spread for her without being asked. He had learned, in 11 years, which things she wanted without being told. And she looked at the road and waited. She was not good at waiting. She had built a company worth 4 billion naira by being the person who moved while others waited. But she had also learned, in 65 years of being alive, that certain kinds of waiting were not passive. They were the kind of work that looks like stillness from the outside and is in fact the most important work, the work of noticing. She noticed the road. She noticed the cashew trees and the quality of the soil and the way the light came through the leaves at this hour. She noticed the boy who had brought Festus to the mechanic, who was now sitting at a distance, watching her with the alert, unself-conscious attention of a child who has not yet learned that watching is considered rude. She looked at him. He did not look away. She respected that. Adewale returned in 23 minutes. Not 20, as he had said. 23. She noticed that too, not as criticism, but as data. A man who says 20 and arrives in 23 is a man who works at the edge of what he believes is possible. That was worth noting. He worked without speaking for the first 40 minutes. She watched him. He had the economy of movement that comes from doing something for a long time without waste. No gesture that was not necessary, no pause that was not deliberate. The engine responded to his hands, the way things respond to people who understand them. She had seen this quality before, in the best lawyers she employed, in the architect who had designed her Abuja office building, in herself, on her best days. She said, "How long have you been doing this?" He looked up briefly. He said, 18 years. She said, "Here on this road?" He said, "Wherever the work is." He went back to the engine. He said, without looking up, "I have a workshop in Sagamu. But the work comes where it comes." She said, "And the work brought you here today." He said, "The boy came to find me. His uncle's tractor needed looking at this morning. I was nearby when your driver came." She said, "Fortune." He said, "Or routine." He glanced at her. "Work makes you available. That is all fortune is." She looked at him. He went back to the engine. She thought about that for a while. Work makes you available. It was the kind of thing that sounded simple until you turned it over and found that it was not simple at all. That it contained an entire philosophy of how a life should be arranged, and that she had spent 40 years living by exactly that philosophy without ever having heard it stated so directly. She said, "Do you have family?" He said, "A daughter. 14. His voice changed slightly when he said it. Not softer exactly, but warmer. The specific warming of a voice that has arrived at its most important subject. He said, "My wife passed 4 years ago." She said, "I am sorry." He said, "Yes." He said it the way people say it, when they have been saying it for 4 years, and have made peace with the weight of it, without making peace with the loss itself. A distinction that she understood from the inside. She said, "What is your daughter's name?" He said, "Eniola." She said, "What does she want to be?" He looked up from the engine again. This time, he held the look for a moment longer. The look of a man deciding whether a question is genuine or decorative. He said, "An engineer, structural. She wants to design bridges." He paused. "She has wanted it since she was 8 years old. She drew a bridge on the wall of our kitchen, and I was angry because it was the wall, and then I looked at the drawing and I could not be angry anymore." She said, "Because it was good?" He said, "Because it was right." He went back to the engine. There is a difference. She sat with that distinction for the remaining 40 minutes it took him to complete the work. When the engine started, a clean, even sound, the sound of a system restored to its intended function, she felt something that she recognized from the best moments of her professional life, the specific satisfaction of a problem correctly solved. She asked him what she owed him. He named a figure. It was a fair figure, not inflated for the car or for her clothes or for the implicit wealth of the situation. A fair figure for the work done. She had been given many figures in her life. Inflated ones, deflated ones, figures that were guesses and figures that were demands. And she had developed over decades the ability to recognize a fair figure immediately. This was one. She paid him. Then she did something she had not planned to do. She gave him her card. He looked at it. Then he looked at her with an expression that was not what she expected. It was not the expression of gratitude or calculation or the performed humility that people sometimes produced when a powerful person gave them their card. It was the expression of someone who has just received information and is deciding what it means. He said, "Adesanya-Coker Holdings." She said, "Yes." He said, "The infrastructure company." She said, "Among other things." He said, "You build bridges." She looked at him. He said it simply, not as a joke, not as a connection he was manufacturing to impress her, as a fact he had just noticed. She said, "Yes, we build bridges." He nodded once. He folded the card carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket. He said, "Thank you, Ma. Safe journey." He got on his motorcycle. He left. Festus drove her back toward Lagos. She sat in the back of the Maybach in the cooling system that Adewale had restored, watching the road change from red laterite to tarmac. And she thought about a man who said work makes you available and whose daughter drew a bridge on a kitchen wall at the age of 8 because the idea had to go somewhere. She did not call her office. She did not open her laptop. She looked at the road and she thought. That was the first day. She did not contact him. Not because she had forgotten. She did not forget things. But because she was watching herself, the way she sometimes watched herself when something unexpected had happened, and she was not yet certain what it meant. She was watching the impulse to act on what she had felt on that road, and asking it to explain itself before she allowed it to move. 3 weeks passed. On the 22nd day, her assistant Priya, who had worked for her for 12 years and who could read her silences the way meteorologists read pressure systems, placed a file on her desk. The file contained a project brief, a bridge, a rural infrastructure project in Ogun State, 40 kilometers from a dirt road with no name, funded jointly by the state government and a European Development Bank. Her company had been shortlisted for the contract. She looked at the file. She looked at Priya. Priya said, "You asked me 3 weeks ago to find any infrastructure projects in that corridor." She paused. "I found one." She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Set up a site visit." She paused. "And find out if there is a mechanic in Sagamu named Adewale Ogundimu." Priya looked at her. She said, "His daughter wants to be a structural engineer. Find out where she is in school and what her grades are like. Priya said, "Yes, Ma." She said, "And Priya," she picked up the project file, "this contract. Who else is on the shortlist?" Priya named 2 companies. Both were large. Both were adequate. Neither of them had ever built anything that someone would call right rather than good. She said, "We will win this one." Priya nodded and left. She sat alone in her office on the 32nd floor of the building her company had built. The building from whose windows you could see, on a clear day, the entire Lagos shoreline arranged in its specific, beautiful, contested complexity. And she thought about a 14-year-old girl who had drawn a bridge on a kitchen wall. She thought about right versus good. She thought about a card, folded carefully and placed in a shirt pocket by a man who had named a fair price, and looked at her without calculation. She thought about what she was going to do. And she understood, with the specific clarity that comes to people who have spent their lives making decisions and have learned to recognize the moment before a consequential one, that she was standing at the edge of something. Not a romantic thing. She was too precise for that kind of softness. But something that was going to require her to be exact about what she wanted and honest about why. She called her lawyer. She said, "I need to discuss my will." Her lawyer said, "Is something wrong?" She said, "No, something is becoming clearer." She paused. "That is different." Her lawyer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When would you like to meet?" She said, "Thursday, and bring the full document. Everything. I want to look at all of it." She put down the phone. Outside, Lagos continued its enormous, indifferent business. The city did not know or care that in an office on the 32nd floor, a 65-year-old woman who had spent 4 decades building things was sitting quietly at her desk and beginning, for the first time in a long time, to think about what she was building toward. But that was only the beginning, because what she did not know, what none of them knew yet, was that the decision she was about to make would set in motion something that her children had never prepared for. Something that would arrive in their lives like a fact that had always been true and had simply been waiting for the right moment to be said out loud. And that moment was coming. Thursday came with rain. The kind of Lagos rain that arrives without negotiation. Sudden, total. The rain that makes the city pause for 20 minutes before deciding to continue regardless. It was falling hard against the windows of the conference room on the 32nd floor when her lawyer, Barrister Chukwudi Obi, arrived with the document under his arm in a leather folder that had accompanied him to every significant meeting of his 30-year career. He was 60, precise, the kind of man who had made his reputation by saying difficult things clearly and without decoration. She had used him for 22 years because he told her the truth even when the truth was inconvenient, which was a rarer quality in lawyers than it should have been. He placed the folder on the table. She poured him water. He did not touch it. She said, "Walk me through the current distribution." He opened the folder. He said, "The estate is divided as follows: 60% to your 3 children in equal shares, 20% to the Adesanya-Coker Foundation, 15% held in trust for any grandchildren at the time of distribution, 5% to named staff members who have served more than 10 years. He paused. "This has been the structure since you revised it in 2019. She said, "What is the total estate value at current assessment?" He named the figure. She looked at the rain against the window. He said, "Is there something specific you want to change?" She said, "Not yet. I want to understand it first." She looked back at him. "My children. Tell me what you observe about them. Not as their mother's lawyer. As someone who has watched this family for 22 years. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Rotimi is capable but impatient. He has his mother's instinct for a deal, but not yet her patience for the moment before the deal." He looked at his hands. "Sola is the most like you. She sees systems. but she sees them from inside and has difficulty understanding why others cannot see what she sees. He paused. Tunde is the most dangerous. She said, Dangerous how? He said, He is charming. He makes people feel that he is giving them something when he is actually taking something. He does it without malice, which makes it harder to address. She was quiet. He said, You asked. She said, I did. She looked at the folder. None of this is new information. I have known my children for over 30 years. She paused. What is new is what I want to do about it. He waited. She said, I want to add a condition to the distribution, not a punitive one, a structural one. She turned from the window to face him. Any child who contests the will or challenges any bequest made within it forfeits their share. Standard clause. He nodded. She said, And I want to add a new bequest. He picked up his pen. She said, A full university scholarship in perpetuity if the funds allow for students from Ogun State pursuing structural engineering or related infrastructure disciplines. She paused. Administered by the foundation, not by the children. He wrote. He said, In perpetuity is a long commitment. She said, I know what in perpetuity means, Chukwudi. He wrote without further comment. She said, And one more thing. She paused. A direct bequest. 10% of the estate to an individual. She looked at him. His name is Adewale Ogundimu. She spelled it. He has a workshop in Sagamu, Ogun State. Barrister Obi stopped writing. He looked at her. She said, Write it down. He said, Yetunde. May I ask? She said, You may ask. I will answer what I choose to. He said, Who is this person? She said, A mechanic. He fixed my car on a dirt road in Ogun State 3 weeks ago. She said it without elaboration, the way she said things when she wanted the fact to be received as a fact and not as an invitation to analysis. He said, 10% is... She said, I know what 10% is, Chukwudi. I also know what the estate is worth. She held his gaze. 10% of this estate will change the trajectory of his daughter's life and the lives of every person his daughter goes on to help. That is what I want the money to do. He said, Your children will contest this. She said, Write the no contest clause in first. Then we will discuss what they will and will not do. He wrote. The rain continued. When Barrister Obi left an hour later, she sat alone with the revised document in front of her and read through it slowly. She had made large financial decisions for 40 years. She had signed contracts that moved hundreds of millions of naira. She had restructured companies, acquired land, negotiated with governments. None of it had felt like this specific, quiet certainty that she was not just distributing wealth, but placing it where it could do the thing that wealth was actually for. She picked up her phone. She called Priya. She said, Did you find him? Priya said, Yes, ma. Adewale Ogundimu. Registered workshop on Abeokuta Road in Sagamu. 1 employee. Annual revenue. She paused. Modest. She paused again. His daughter, Eniola Ogundimu, is in JSS 3 at Government Secondary School, Sagamu. She paused one more time. She came first in her class last term in mathematics and in technical drawing. She said, Technical drawing. Priya said, Yes, ma. The school says she is the only girl in the technical drawing class. She said it with the specific quality in her voice that meant she understood the significance of what she was saying. She was quiet for a moment. She said, I want to offer her a scholarship, starting with her senior secondary, the best science school in Ogun State. She paused. Find out which one that is. Priya said, I already know. She named it. She said, Arrange it. Do not tell her father it came from me. Tell her it came from the foundation. It does come from the foundation. Priya said, Yes, ma. She said, And the bridge project, the site visit. When is it scheduled? Priya said, next Tuesday. She said, good. She ended the call. She did not contact Adewale directly. She had decided this deliberately, in the way she made all deliberate decisions, by sitting with the impulse until she understood its shape. The impulse to contact him was real. But she was 65 years old, and she had learned the difference between what she wanted to do and what she should do. And the distance between those two things was where wisdom lived. What she should do was build the scholarship, build the bridge. Let the foundation do what it was built for. Let the money go where it was needed without requiring anything in return. Not gratitude, not relationship, not the specific warmth she had felt sitting under a cashew tree on a road with no name, listening to a man say things that were simple and right. She was doing that. She was doing all of that. What she had not accounted for was her children. Rotimi found out first. She did not know how. She suspected Barrister Obi's junior associate, who had a loose relationship with discretion that she had noted before and not yet acted on. Rotimi called her on a Friday evening, and she knew from the first sound of his voice that he had been sitting with the information long enough to have arranged it into an argument. He said, "Mama, I need to talk to you about the will." She said, "Good evening, Rotimi." He said, "Good evening." He said it impatiently, the courtesy of a man performing courtesy under pressure. He said, "Someone told me you revised the will, that you added a new beneficiary." She said, "Someone told you incorrectly. I did revise the will. The beneficiary is not new. The foundation has always been in it." She said it simply, without aggression, giving him the minimum of what was technically true. He said, "The mechanic, Mama." He said it the way people say things they find ridiculous, with a specific weight of disbelief in each syllable. "You gave 10% of our inheritance to a mechanic from Sagamu." She said, "I revised my estate to reflect my current intentions. That is what wills are for." He said, "Mama, this man fixed your car. One time, on a road somewhere." She said, "Yes." He said, "And you gave him," she said, "Rotimi." She said his name with the specific quality that she had used since he was 7 years old when he was about to say something he could not take back. He stopped. She said, "This is my estate. Built by my work over 40 years. I will distribute it as I see fit." She paused. "If you have concerns, bring them to Barrister Obi in writing. I will not discuss it on a Friday evening phone call." He said, "Mama, we are your children." She said, "I know who you are." She said it gently, which was more devastating than any other tone would have been. "Good night, Rotimi." She ended the call. Sola called Saturday morning, then Tunde on Sunday afternoon. Each conversation had the same shape: the performed concern, the carefully positioned references to her age, the implication that a woman of 65 who gave 10% of her estate to a mechanic she had met once must be assessed for something. She received each call with the same calm, unbreachable directness. She said nothing that she had not already said to Rotimi. She did not raise her voice. She did not explain herself beyond what she chose to explain. She ended each call when it had run its course. On Monday she called Barrister Obi. She said, "My children are going to contest the will." He said, "I told you." She said, "Yes." "Is the no contest clause airtight?" He said, "It is as airtight as such clauses get." He paused. "But Yetunde, if they can argue diminished capacity, the clause may not protect you." She said, "Can they argue it successfully?" He was quiet. He said, "Not on current evidence. But if they bring a medical assessment," she said, "let them try." She said it without drama, with the settled authority of someone who has been healthy and sharp and entirely herself for 65 years and is not afraid of the record. She said, "In the meantime, make sure the document is witnessed again. 3 witnesses this time." I want there to be no procedural question. He said, I will arrange it this week. She said, and Chukwudi, the associate, the one who told Rotimi. He was quiet. She said, let him go. He said, I understand. She said, thank you. She ended the call. The site visit was Tuesday. She drove to Ogun State in the Maybach, Festus behind the wheel. The same road that had failed her 3 weeks ago, now passable because it had rained and the surface had firmed. She sat in the back and watched the cashew trees go by and did not think about what she was thinking about. The site was extraordinary. A river crossing, wide, rocky, the kind of terrain that makes engineers either retreat or get precise. Her team was there. The project director, 2 structural engineers, a hydrology consultant. They walked the site in the early morning, before the heat became serious, and she listened and asked questions and made notes on the small notepad she always carried. At the edge of the site, looking at the river from a high bank, she stood alone for a moment while her team discussed something behind her. She heard footsteps. She turned. Adewale Ogundemu was standing 10 meters away, looking at the same river. He was wearing the same kind of work shirt. He had a younger man with him, his one employee, she assumed, and he was holding a piece of equipment she recognized as a basic soil testing tool. He had not seen her yet. He was looking at the river with the focused, unhurried attention that she recognized. She said, Adewale. He turned. He looked at her. He looked at the Maybach parked behind her team. He looked back at her. He said, Mama Yetunde. She said, what are you doing here? He said, the local government contracted me to do preliminary soil assessments for the access road on this side. He paused. What are you doing here? She said, my company is bidding for the bridge contract. He looked at the river. He said, good. He said it the way he had said things on the dirt road, simply as assessment without decoration. He said, this river needs someone who builds bridges that are right, not just good. She looked at him. He looked at her. She said, you remember that. He said, I remember what I say. She said, come and meet my team. He said, I am working. She said, so are they. Come and meet them anyway. He hesitated for a moment. Then he called something to his employee and walked toward her. She walked beside him toward her team, and she introduced him. Adewale Ogundemu, soil assessment contractor, local knowledge. And she watched the micro-expressions on her team's faces as they processed a man in a work shirt being introduced by their CEO as someone worth knowing. She watched them recalibrate. She found, to her own mild surprise, that she enjoyed watching them recalibrate. He spoke to the hydrology consultant about the river's behavior in flood season. He knew things that none of her team knew. Specific, local, observational knowledge, the kind that comes from living near a thing for years rather than reading about it. Her project director, who was 40 and had built bridges in 4 countries, listened with the focused attention of someone receiving information they could not have gotten elsewhere. After 30 minutes, Adewale said he needed to return to his work. She walked with him a short distance, out of her team's hearing. She said, I want to tell you something. He said, okay. She said, I have set up a scholarship through my foundation for students in Ogun State who want to study structural engineering. She paused. Your daughter Eniola has been selected as one of the first recipients. She will receive full funding for her senior secondary education at the best science school in the state. He was still. He said, how do you know about Eniola? She said, I asked. He said, you asked. She said, yes. She held his gaze. She came first in mathematics and technical drawing last term. She drew a bridge on a kitchen wall when she was 8 years old. She paused. That kind of thing should not go unsupported because of money. He said nothing for a long moment. She watched his face do the thing that faces do when something large has arrived and the person is deciding how to receive it, whether to defend against it or open toward it. He said, "Why?" She said, "Because I can, and because it is right." She said the word deliberately. He recognized it. She saw him recognize it. She said, "Is that enough?" He said, "For the scholarship, yes." He paused. "But that is not the only thing you are telling me." She looked at him. He said, "You revised your will." She went still. He said, "My daughter came home last week saying she had been selected for a scholarship from the Adesanya-Coker Foundation. I looked up the foundation. I looked up the estate. I read the public filing from your lawyer's office." He paused. "There is a new individual beneficiary. 10%. He looked at her directly. "I am not stupid, Mama Yetunde." She said, "No, you are not." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because of what you said on the road." She paused. "Work makes you available. That is all fortune is." She looked at the river. "I have been building things for 40 years. I have not always known why." She paused. "You said something true in a way that I had not heard before. And your daughter draws bridges, and I build them." She paused. "I want the money to do something real when I am gone, not just to maintain what exists." He said, 10% of your estate is—" She said, "I know what it is." He said, "My children, you have children." She said, "Yes, they are not pleased." He said, "They will fight it." She said, "They will try." She said it without fear, with the calm assurance of someone who has anticipated this and prepared for it. She looked at him. "What I need to know is whether you will fight it too." She paused. "Whether this is something you want or something that will feel wrong to you." He was quiet for a long time. The river moved below them. Her team's voices reached them faintly from the site. A bird called from somewhere in the trees on the far bank. He said, "I fixed your car for 5,000 naira. He said it without bitterness. I named a fair price and you paid it. That was the transaction." She said, "Yes." He said, "This is not the same transaction." She said, "No, it is not." He said, "Why should I accept something I did not earn?" She said, "You earned Eniola's scholarship." "She is the one who earned it," you will say, and you will be right. But you earned her. 18 years of work that made you available. 18 years of teaching her what right looks like versus good. She paused. "The money is not payment for fixing the car. It is recognition of what it costs to be the kind of man you are in a world that rarely notices." He looked at the river for a long time. He said, "And if I say no?" She said, "Then I will find another way to put the money where it does the most good." She paused. "But I believe you are the most good. I believe the Ogundimu name attached to a foundation or a scholarship or a bridge will mean something in this state for a generation." She looked at him. "I am 65 years old. I have been wrong before. I am not wrong about this." He said nothing. The river continued. Then he said, "I need time." She said, "Take it." He said, "How much time do I have?" She said, "The will is already signed and witnessed. You have as much time as you need to decide how to feel about it." She paused. "The document does not require your permission to exist." He looked at her. Something moved in his face. Not amusement exactly, but the close relative of it. The expression that arrives when a person recognizes that they have been outmaneuvered by someone who is operating at a different level and has done it with enough grace that indignation is not available. He said, "You already signed it." She said, "3 witnesses." He said, "Before you told me." She said, "Yes." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because I knew that if I told you first, you would say no before I could explain, and I needed you to hear the explanation." She held his gaze. "Was I wrong to do it that way?" He was quiet. Then he said, "No." He said it with the honesty of a man who respects honesty even when it has been used against him. He said, "No, you were not wrong." She nodded. He said, "Eniola will not know where the scholarship came from?" She said, "She knows it comes from the foundation. The foundation was built with my money, but her name is in there for her work, not for mine." He nodded. She said, "When she is old enough to understand all of it, that is your decision to make, not mine." He said, "Yes." He looked at the river one more time. Then he looked at her. He said, "The bridge you build here, build it right." She said, "That is the only way I know how to build." He nodded once. He walked back toward his employee and his soil testing equipment and his work. She stood at the edge of the bank and watched him go. 1 year later, the bridge opened. It was not the largest bridge her company had built. It was not the most expensive. But it was the kind of bridge that engineers come to look at, the kind where the decisions are visible in the structure, where you can see that someone thought carefully about what the river needed and what the people crossing it needed, and made something that served both without compromising either. Her project director said it was the best work her company had done in a decade. She did not disagree. At the opening ceremony, Eniola Ogundimu stood beside her father in the front row. She was 15 now, enrolled in her new school, carrying herself with the specific confidence of a young person who has been given resources and knows what to do with them. She looked at the bridge the way her father looked at engines, with full attention, reading it, understanding it from the inside. Adewale stood beside his daughter and said nothing. He did not need to say anything. His presence was its own statement, the presence of a man who had spent 18 years doing work that no one important had noticed, and who had not needed anyone to notice it to continue doing it, and who was standing now at the opening of a bridge built by the woman who had finally noticed. He caught her eye across the crowd. She nodded once. He nodded back. 3 months after the opening, Rotimi, Sola, and Tunde engaged a second lawyer to challenge the will. The no contest clause was invoked. Barrister Obi presented the 3 witness documentation and the full medical record of a woman in complete cognitive health at the time of signing. The challenge collapsed in the first hearing. The judge's comment, recorded in the transcript, was brief. The testator was evidently of sound and deliberate mind. The estate would be distributed as written. Her children did not speak to her for 2 months. Then Sola called. She said, "Mama." She said, "Sola." Sola said, "I read the transcript." She paused. "I read everything you said to the lawyer about why you made the changes." She was quiet. "I did not understand it before. I think I understand it now." She said, "What do you understand?" Sola said, "That you are not trying to punish us." She paused. "That you are trying to put the money where it does the thing money is supposed to do." She paused again. "I am still not happy about it." She said, "I know." Sola said, "But I am beginning to understand it." She said, "That is enough." Sola said, "The girl, Eniola." She paused. "Did you see how she looked at the bridge?" She said, "Yes." Sola said, "She looked at it the way you look at things." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, she does." Sola said, "I think I see what you saw." She said nothing. She did not need to say anything. The silence between them was the good kind, the kind that holds understanding rather than concealing the lack of it. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever watched someone do quiet work that the world did not notice and understood, finally, what it was worth, subscribe to Tales of Tears African and ring the bell. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the most important things are not always seen in the moment they happen. They are seen later, when something built from them is standing in front of you, and you can finally name what you are looking at. Leave a comment. What was the moment in this story that hit you hardest? We read every one. We are here every week. The next story is already waiting.